everybody. My name is Sreedhari Desai, and I'm here to present to you some work that I've done with Francesca Gino at Harvard Business School, and also Mariam Kuchaki, who's over here from Northwestern University. I want to start with a very dismal observation that oftentimes contractors, managers, employees end up behaving badly. They overbill, they surcharge customers, and this is really not ideal. So, Dolly Chugh just told us a little while ago that oftentimes our ethicality is constrained by self-interest. We're boundedly ethical, right? Now, given that we're boundedly ethical, what is the right way to get all of us to behave better? Now, traditional economics would say that if you want a contractor to do your bidding, A, you should go ahead and monitor him or her, and B, you should incentivize them to do the right thing. But this is easier said than done, especially in the knowledge economy. Organizational scholars, on the other hand, would like us to try and use a code of ethics to prompt people to do the right thing. However, systematic research has shown that the efficacy of codes of ethics is mixed at best. Think about the 64-page code of ethics used at Enron. Didn't do much good, yeah? So the big challenge facing us is how do we get our contractors, our managers, our employees to do the right thing? Today, I'm going to talk to you about 3 nudges that you can use. Nudge number 1, infuse accountability. Let me tell you how I went about discovering this particular nudge. Several years ago, when I was a grad student in Harvard, I was lonely and miserable, okay? And so I used okcupid.com to find true love. Okay. Now, because I wanted to protect my privacy, I used a math equation from one of my research papers as my profile picture. And interestingly, and thank goodness for this, a Russian astrophysicist fell in love with me and my math equation. Okay? The minute he went ahead and proposed to me, I did what any smart Indian bride-to-be would do. I hopped on a plane, flew to India, told my mom, I need to go shopping for saris. Well, I realized that a lot of the boutiques were charging me significantly more than I was expecting to pay them. When I complained to my mom, she said, of course, you're not asking for itemized bill. I thought, really? Is that all that it takes? So I'd go to more boutiques, and this time around, I was smart. I asked them, how much for the sari? How much for the blouse? How much for the fall, the petticoat, the custom embroidery? And lo and behold, I saved 200 rupees per sari. So Maya, if you're listening to this, do what I did, okay? So when I returned to the US, I picked up the phone, I called Mariam Kuchaki, and I said, Mariam, we've got to test this nudge in systematic ways. So we ran a series of studies in the lab where we basically had contractors either present us with itemized bills or bulk bills, and it turns out that asking for itemized bills resulted in more accountability and less overbilling. All good in the lab, but would it work in the real world in the US of A? So we turned our attention to the auto repair and service sector, because according to the Better Business Bureau, this is one of the worst sectors, okay? It ranks in the top 10 in terms of unethical practices. So we hired a research assistant, and we told her to call up a bunch of garages in the Boston area. So she'd pick up the phone, and she'd say, hey, you know what? Anytime I step on the brakes, they squeal. Could you tell me how much it's going to cost me to go ahead and replace the brake pads and resurface the rotors? So in the control condition, she'd ask for the bulk bill, but in the nudge condition, she would ask, hey, how much for the parts? How much for labor? It turns out that in the nudge condition, asking for itemized bill led to less overbilling. These are good faith estimates, lower by $37. So the first nudge I want you to remember is to infuse accountability. The second nudge is about displaying moral symbols. Imagine you're a securities broker working for a large corporation. Your boss asks you to go ahead and peddle high-risk mutual funds to close-to-retirement clients who don't really want to hold risky assets. You realize that your boss is essentially asking you to lie to your clients, but you feel caught between your principles and payday. What do? I think this is a horrible problem to have, And as I lay mulling about it, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could somehow give our employees a necklace of garlic that would prevent organizational vampires from asking them to do something unethical? Brilliant as it sounded, I really didn't have a good idea what the necklace of garlic might be. Luckily for me, around this time, I met Denise Serretta, who was running a cafe in Salt Lake City called One World Cafe. What was so unique about Denise's cafe was that you not only decided what to eat, but you decided what to pay. So patrons would come in, self-serve some food, and then they'd go into this room where they would anonymously leave money. As you can imagine, some of the patrons were not leaving adequate amounts of money. So we decided to use an intervention. Our intervention was to use pictures of moral leaders like Mother Teresa, okay, John Lennon, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. And it turns out that the simple intervention caused patrons to amp up and pay about $1.83 more per plate. This helped her business tremendously. And I thought, hey, can we actually use this idea of moral leaders or moral symbols in organizational settings? So coming to the lab, we had participants come to the lab and we said, hey, we want you to take part in a virtual game. And as a part of this game, you will be paired up with two subordinates. And they would get to interact with the subordinates in the form of avatars. Very cool stuff, okay? Now, some of the avatars would either display a moral symbol in the form of t-shirts that would have words like yourmorals.org. This is a real website, by the way, or yourmoney.com, okay? We also did studies where we had the avatars, the subordinates, the fictitious subordinates display email quotes. So at the bottom of outgoing emails, there would be moral quotes such as, success without honor is worse than fraud, or in the control condition, success and luck go hand in hand. It turns out that displaying a moral symbol causes your boss to be significantly less likely to ask you to do something unethical. And we thought, the lab is all good, but would this work in the real world? So we used the idea of moral symbols simply by asking supervisor-subordinate dyads in India to report certain things. We asked the supervisors, hey, does your subordinate display any kind of religious icon like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, quotes from the Quran in his or her cubicle? And we asked the subordinates, does your boss ask you to do something unethical, like lie to clients? It turns out that those subordinates that were displaying moral symbols in their cubicle were significantly less likely to be asked to do something unethical. And Keith Levitt, who's in the room here, is a co-author on a piece with Luc Zhu at University of Manitoba, where they find similar and even deeper effects of moral symbols. So, second nudge, go ahead and display moral symbols. The third nudge is one that is really borrowed in a sense from what Astro said earlier, what Wendy said earlier, which was about this idea of recreating childhood and play at work. Think about it. In the popular culture, oftentimes we use images of little children to portray innocence and moral purity. For instance, as an artist, I'd love to show you Bouguerou's famous painting, La Innocence, in which he uses the imagery of a little baby to depict innocence. Likewise, in the famous novel Silas Marner, little baby Epi brings about a change of heart in the protagonist. Okay? In the US, you've got Citizen Kane, where the symbol of a childhood sled signifies moral purity. Similarly, William Blake's Songs of Innocence use images of or ideas of childhood. In fact, even across several religions, the idea of childhood and moral purity is deeply coupled. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre, which means that when a child is born, his or her soul is full of dharma, goodness. However, as the child gets older, his heart or soul becomes like Kurukshetra, a battlefield between good and evil. Do no evil, Google. Okay, so the idea that we wanted to test was, hey, might reminders of childhood result in people behaving better? So we had people come to the lab, and we asked them to either engage in free drawing, think about Google Doodle, okay? Or we had them copy complicated iron carbon diagrams. It turns out that free drawing leads to less unethical behavior subsequently. Likewise, listening to nursery rhymes, playing with teddy bears causes individuals to behave better. A side effect, you also experience less anxiety when you connect with your inner child. So, third nudge, go ahead and recreate childhood in your workplace. So very quickly, I've told you about 3 nudges today. Nudge number 1, go ahead, infuse accountability in people. Nudge number 2, display moral symbols. Nudge number 3, recreate childhood at work. Thank you.